It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Matt Tait covers the Kansas Athletics for R1S1Sports.com. Check out his byline right there. This portion of the show brought to you by Doug Smith and the family of dealerships in American Fork, Spanish Fork, and in Linden. Matt, thanks for being with us on the program, man.
You bet, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Listen, this is one of those. Jalon Daniels is a name that has come up, I think, every year since forever, it seems like. I don't know how long he's been at Kansas, but I think with all the hype that he's been given over the past few seasons, is this finally the year that Lance Leipold gets Jalon Daniels, not just as the most production that we've seen, but also the most healthy that they're hoping for, obviously, out of their quarterback?
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's the key, putting the two together, right? This is year 6, and, man, Jalon came to KU as a 17-year-old freshman. He was thrown to the Wolves under Les Miles pretty quickly, not necessarily the intent to play him that early, but injuries, and the kid's got moxie, and he's tough, and he was ready, and he has just done nothing but develop since then. But, yeah, staying healthy has been a key. He did play all 12 games last year, but, it was one of his worst seasons statistically, especially for the first 6-7 games. And then he got back to who he was and who he is in the Final Four games. And they beat Colorado, BYU, and Iowa State, 3 ranked teams in a row. Impressive wins. I mean, as much as that brought the fan base back and reminded everybody how great Jalon can be when he's clicking, it was almost one of those bittersweet things. It was like depressing for fans because they started 1-5 last year, and if that 1-5 is just 3-3, they're on their way to a bowl game after they beat those 3 ranked teams, and probably a pretty good bowl game because those were 3 really good teams too. Sorry, it was Colorado, wasn't it? Colorado, BYU, and Iowa State.
Yes.
Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Okay, cool. So anyway, enough about last year, but you're right. I mean, number one, they got to get the production for 12 games to match up with the health for 12 games. And if they do that, Kansas can play with anybody. I mean, they've got a largely new team. Half the roster is new faces, but they're good pieces on both sides of the ball. It's reasonable to think that it'll take some time to come together, but there's also enough veteran presence on both sides, starting with Jalon, that it can happen pretty quickly. So there's no doubt that this season very much feels like as Jalon goes, this Kansas football team will go. And it also feels like, to me, one of those seasons where if Jalon is good and as good as he can be and utilizes his weapons and all that stuff, you're looking at this being a game every week where maybe KU has to beat teams 45-35 or 45-41 or whatever it is, and that's not necessarily a knock on the defense, but they're replacing an entire linebacking core. Their secondary is almost entirely new. I mean, it's going to be a very, very interesting journey on the defensive side of the ball. So if Jalon's not ready to carry some of the load that requires for those guys to settle in, then this could be a rough year. And if he is, he's probably going to have to go out and win games in that sort of gunslinger mentality. And, lucky for KU, it's exactly the way he loves to play the game, and he's willing to do whatever, whenever.
You recently wrote The Optimist View of How KU Football Will Fare in 2025, a 2-part series. You mentioned some of that there, obviously, but as you look at the end of last season, if you're an optimist about Kansas, are you feeling like that's who the Jayhawks are and they can build off of the way that last season ended? Or is there too much that they have to figure out and too many question marks on this team? Where do you lie on that?
Yeah, I think that's the optimist view for sure, is that even though the receiving core is entirely new almost and the guys that they're replacing are some of the all-time greats at KU, and in addition to that, guys that were, some of Jalon Daniels' best friends. That's different, right? Like that's a lot of built over 4 years chemistry, knowing a guy inside and out type of thing that's just gone. But the guys they brought in, man, they seem like legitimate weapons. Jalon did a really cool thing this offseason. He invited everybody in the receiver room out to his home in California, where he spent some time training with his his quarterback's coach out there, and that was designed entirely to just make sure the chemistry is as expedited as it can be and bond a little bit more than just, in practice or in the film room. And so those guys, I think it was 6, 7, 8 guys, took advantage of that opportunity and went out there and spent some time with him and threw the ball around, and they hung out together, of course, and, met his family. And so things like that, I think, really say a lot about where Jalen's head is at. Like I said, I mean, there's no part of Jalon that thought he was going to be the starting quarterback for Kansas in 2025. He had NFL aspirations 2 years ago even, and certainly after heading into last year. So the fact that he's still here is very much, a blessing for KU, but also a surprise to him. And I think what he's done, realizing that half the roster is new and all these receivers are new, and this more than ever has been kind of thrust into being his team. The dude is charismatic as it gets, and has a lot of fun and has this signature smile and all that. But this off season and heading into camp so far, I mean, the coaches, the strength coach, his teammates, they talk about seeing a guy with a totally different demeanor, laser focused, locked in, realizing what's at stake this year. And what's at stake for him is his legacy at Kansas and his future as a pro quarterback. So it's a big freaking year for Jalon Daniels. But, the guy's been through so many ups and downs, and he's been through everything you can almost imagine a college football player having been through. He loves that stuff. He loves the moment. He loves the challenge, and he loves more than anything when people maybe count him out a little bit. And that's kind of the whole thing with this team. Last year they were a fairly popular playoff team, conversationally anyway. Maybe not everybody picked them, but a handful of people did, and certainly a contender in the Big 12. And that was different for these guys. The way they built this thing at Kansas under Lance Leipold was with that chip on your shoulder. We're going to grind, we're going to be the underdogs, and we're going to relish that and really embrace it, and we're going to use that to our advantage. And last year they weren't that. They were expected to be, one of the big dogs. And it took them a little while to kind of live in that space and get comfortable feeling that. And for teams and programs and players that haven't done that, that's totally human nature, So I think this year more than anything, because of last year, they're back to where they're used to being. And I think that fits Jalon perfectly, but I think that fits Lance Leipold perfectly, and I think it fits this whole roster. There's a bunch of guys that have that mentality and have had that throughout their careers.
Lance Leipold, we chatted with him at Big 12 Media Days, and he's a guy that has continued to have a lot of swagger despite the fact that his team seemed to – and he even mentioned, he goes, we got off to the worst start at the beginning of last year, and it just it sunk the team. And yeah, we had some great games at the end, but it was a too little too late deal. But that they did learn a lot about themselves in that time. What's the feeling on Lance Leipold there? It almost feels like he is set to burst here when it comes to some success here, or it seems like it's been like that for the past few years. Everybody's waiting for that, Wisconsin Whitewater success that he had where he brought 5 or 6 Division III national championships to that program in short time. I know that he's got a lot of talent, and I wonder what the patience is like for Kansas fans with Lance Leipold.
Well, there's no doubt that last year was a blow, right? You go 9 wins the year before and win a bowl game in convincing fashion, and that's back-to-back bowl appearances, and those things aren't just common at KU. They're just not, and so it was a real opportunity to go to 3 in a row. And gosh, they didn't have to do much to get there, right? I mean, they finished 5-7 after starting 1-5. So again, if even just 1 or 2 of those games early on flips the other way, they're 3 straight bowls. So it did hurt the fan base midway through the season, but winning those 3 games in a row against really good teams and reminding everybody that this is still who they are, that brought the fans back for sure. And there's a $450 million stadium ready to open right now that shows how people feel about Lance Leipold. They are believers. They love everything he's about. They love his fight. They love his culture that he creates. They love the players he brings in. And by and large, it's a high character group of guys, and that resonates with the fans as well. So, this is a big year though for that very reason. I mean, if you go 9 wins after back-to-back bowl appearances and then you follow that up with with 2 seasons of no bowl, people are going to start grumbling. There's no doubt about it. That probably would have been the case anyway, but that's absolutely the case in 2025 for every college program in the country, right? That's just the world we live in now. So in that regard, it's a big season. They got to at least get to 6 or 7 wins and be a bowl team. And if they are, I think, then you're right. You're talking about teeing it up for that next jump, because their recruiting has been incredible over the last couple of years. They really have done things in the recruiting space that no Kansas team has done in terms of national rankings, in terms of, the quality of the star rankings of the players that they're getting. It's really impressive, and it's really wild, because for 10 years, Kansas was the laughingstock of college football and the doormat of the Big 12. And in a very short period of time after Leipold arrived, they've completely flipped the culture. And the culture now is, this is a place people expect to win. And all these guys, whether you're talking about recruits or transfer portal guys or whatever, those guys are coming to Kansas because they look at Kansas and say, I can win there. And for me, man, I've covered this thing for 20 plus years, and the fact that we're seeing that and we're hearing guys say that, and that's the reality of Kansas football right now, it's not something that I'll get over for a while. It's mind blowing, because for 10 years it was as bad as it got, and that's what people see in Lance Leipold. He's it's a cheesy word, but he's very much the savior. I mean, he dug this program out of the dirt, and he didn't do it by himself, but he was the man on top of the totem pole that made it happen and inspired the players to get it done, and this whole thing is in his image right now. So in a bunch of very real ways, this is still just the beginning of what he thinks he can do here. And again, if they can have a successful season this year, then the next 2, 3, 4 years after that have a chance to really take it to another level.
Who's the Jayhawks' biggest football rival, Missouri or Kansas State or somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, it's Missouri historically, no question about it. That's a great game. It's been unbelievable for decades. It goes back to the Civil War, the hatred between the two states. If people in Utah aren't well versed on it, I understand that, but it's legitimate, man. It is vicious stuff. I mean, there's a guy named William Quantrill who burned down the town of Lawrence from Missouri, and that stuff doesn't get forgotten, right? Nobody's around who lived through it or whatever, but like generations ago, that was the thing, and that's trickled down, and there's still descendants and things like that, right? So there's no question that whether you're talking about softball or basketball or football or whatever, the best rivalries, KU Missouri, without question. And to be frank with you, it's absolutely impossible for any KU fans to walk around and say it's K-State, because they don't beat K-State. It's 16 in a row losses to those guys. So until that changes, it's impossible to say that it goes that way. That game is awesome. It's an in-state rivalry. There's so much at stake. And, between the two programs, you're talking about, 75 to 100 kids who grew up in the state of Kansas playing in that game, or on the field for that game at least, and so it obviously means a lot to a lot of families and a lot of players, and there's no doubt that it has a lot of meaning. But in terms of just the bitterness that comes with, like, Duke, Carolina, Red Sox, Yankees, whatever, man, it's KU Mizzou, no question about it. And they play each other this year. KU goes over to Columbia for the first time in a very, very long time, and Mizzou's probably going to be a preseason ranked team, and Kansas won't be. But again, I think it's a situation where Missouri is probably better at damn near every position except one, and the one is probably quarterback. So we know how important the quarterback is, right? I mean, Jalon Daniels has the talent and the belief and the swagger to walk over to Missouri, and I'm sure he'll take a bus, but to walk over to that stadium and find a way to get a win. I wouldn't necessarily bet on it. I don't necessarily think anybody should count on it. I don't know that it's actually coming, but I guarantee he believes he's going to do it, and that goes a long way. So that'll be really cool. That's their third game of the year. They play Fresno State and then Wagner to open, and neither one of those is a gimme game by any means, but they should win both of those games, especially opening a new stadium and all that. And so at that point, you go in 2-0 to Missouri, and you're playing your rival for the first time in a decade, and man, you're talking about a really, really cool Week 3 game all of a sudden, or Week 2, I guess it would be, because they play Week 0 this year. So it's cool to have that back. It'll be a lot of fun to see it, and they'll continue that series next year and a couple years beyond that, and hopefully renew it after that. Because you guys know what rivalries are all about.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's there's nothing better, and the more we can see that in college football, that's one of the things that sucks so much about realignment, right? It's just it gutted some of those, and bygones be bygones or whatever. But it's cool to see some of them start coming back, and man, I would take them every week. There's just no better way to watch and play and cover football than rivalry games.
Matt Tait, he covers KU athletics. R1S1sports.com is where you can see his byline. And, Matt, we appreciate you taking some time out, man. We're looking forward to that Utah and Kansas matchup, the final regular season week of the year on Thanksgiving weekend. So we appreciate you joining us, and we'll chat with you before that matchup, hopefully in November.
Yeah, sounds good. I was going to say that's like 100 years away. It feels like right now, but
you know how quickly these seasons go, though. It's like suddenly in week 8.
know.
Yeah, we didn't have time to reminisce about the Utah-Kansas history. We'll save that for another time.
There you go. Sounds good. KU has 3 bye weeks this week, so maybe I'll take 3 trips. That sounds
there
good.
you go.
There you go.
But yeah, no, anytime. You need me before that, after that, whatever. Give me a holler anytime. Thanks for having me, man. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right, there's Matt Tait, covers Kansas.